Hello, everyone. It's good to be back at College Park. I haven't been back here for 10 years. So this is the first time. Saw all the construction. Exciting, scary. Didn't feel like it was my spot all at the same time. And then I went to the Student Union, Chick-fil-A, sorry. Chick-fil-A sounds good too. Had my chicken nuggets with ketchup. It was awesome. And so thanks for having me here. So we'll jump into it in a second. But again, thanks for coming on a Friday. I know Friday specifically is a time you don't want to come here and talk to someone, anybody in general, or hear them talk about anything. And so again, thank you. And the way I'll run the slides and talk through this is going to be pretty casual. So if you guys have questions in the middle, and you want to interrupt, or I'm saying something that you think you completely disagree with and you need some clarification, then feel free to just stand up, jump around, raise your hands, and then ask me to pick on you. So with that, we'll start real quickly. She's going to be my clicker because I don't know how to click and use that thing. But anyways, so I went here to Maryland. I worked in private equity and finance for a couple of years. I loved it, kind of. But I always felt I was not part of building something, and I grew up in California. It's where I'm from, and I always liked the process of building. And I had actually started a company in roughly around 2003. It was like an automotive aftermarket parts, and we basically just built. If anyone's familiar with it, we used to build turbo manifolds, and we used to sell it online as soon as e-commerce showed up, and that was my first foray. Anyways, from there I came here to college, and got my first job, et cetera, et cetera. And what took me back essentially was that I wanted to start from the ground up again and build. I wanted to be a part of building products, and that was my passion. And but to be honest, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to build, but I had an affinity towards social products, consumer products, things that people touched, and I felt like I could add value to it given my humanities-based approach. Given that I'd studied history, and I felt like I had a little bit more in tune with what people wanted, what they didn't want, what they liked, what they didn't like. Versus an engineer. No pun intended towards engineers, but binary thought. And so I also had learned to code when I was a kid, so I thought, maybe this approach I could come back and add value to when I came back home in California. This quote is from Steve Jobs. I was lucky enough to live not too far away from him, and so when I came back, this is right at the age of when the iPhone was starting, but it wasn't clear that was going to be the exact future. I think for some people and pundits it was. But I was definitely in the camp with whatever iPhone, not going to change the world at all. There's BlackBerry, there's a Nokia E61, which I used, and no one remembers, and I talk about it all the time. But he said something that was very, I took that quote and started thinking about it more and more. It didn't hit me immediately when he said it. But he basically said, you need to start thinking about yourself as a product, everything as a product. And I'll dive deeper about what that actually means. But, this drawing sort of exemplifies what I mean by that, which is a company is a product, your team is a product, and the way in which you think about organizing yourself and developing yourself as a product. And so that's how I run my teams. It's how we organize a lot of our facets of the company at Yahoo today, and also in reinventing ourselves. And what I really mean by that, and giving an example, is just because you do sales, just because you do marketing, inside sales or outbound sales, whatever you think about every aspect of a company or people that are part of a team, you need to think about it as a product as well, because that process could improve. And so if you are doing direct marketing, doesn't mean it always has to stay the same. If you are doing brand marketing, you can think of it as a product, and what are ways in which you can continue to innovate based on that concept. Everything starts at zero. This is, again, another quote, not from him, but a bunch of other people that I respect in the space. And the valley is pretty small, and a lot of what we do is collaborate and talk to each other, and Accelerate is very similar to this, which is try to learn from each other around how we're thinking about product life cycles, how do you start something, how do I get my first customers. And I think, again, it is common sense, but sometimes you have to take a step back from whatever you're building, and just remember everything takes time. It starts from zero, and whenever you are starting from zero, you are marching towards progress. Things don't happen immediately. The things that you hear about overnight successes, they take years to become overnight successes. They don't happen immediately, and it takes time. And so I always try to remember anytime I talk to my teammates, new students, that it's okay to start from zero. It's okay that you don't have customers day one. It's okay if you don't have revenue immediately, but if there's a path towards it, you want to think about it from that perspective. And what are like the milestones that you want to reach towards whatever your true north is? This is my favorite graph ever. And in my opinion, it exemplifies like everything companies do, people do, and the way in which people think about marketing, branding, and product development. So has anyone ever seen this before? Okay, so Y Combinator Paul Graham had first shown this, which is to say, like, here's the cycle of what companies go through, and where the points of interest might be where the company either succeeds or fails. I lead the growth team at Yahoo, and this is all we talk about, which are what are the ways in which we can make Yahoo existing products get to the promised land, and make the delta between the wearing off of novelty and the promised land as small as possible. Now, does anybody know what a growth team is, or if they've ever heard of it before at all? Raise your hand if you have no idea what I'm talking about. It's like half. Either you guys are not participating in the questions that I'm asking, or you guys, all of you guys know what a growth team is, and I'm going to pick on somebody. Does anybody not know what a growth team is? Okay. So really quickly, it just started about 10 years ago. A guy named Chamath at Facebook started it. It was like he was the first concept behind it, and it was basically to bring product engineering, marketing, and have like a statistics-based and engineering approach towards growing a product or a company. In most cases, a product. And so I lead that team at Yahoo, and our goal is to do that, which is that we don't care where it, we don't care about departments, we don't care where it's located, we don't care about who owns it. Is that if we think we can have a statistics-based approach towards improving any product, any system within the company, we go and we figure it out and we take it over and figure out how to make things grow again. Why that's important at Yahoo specifically is that Yahoo is an old company. There's a lot of legacy architecture. So the ways in which software development, product development that you guys are using now, or that you're used to, is things that Yahoo has had to catch up on, and is going to continue to do that. And as you know, the space moves very, very quickly over a course of 6 months to a year. So part of a goal of any company is to try to stay ahead of the game rather than behind it. And so I would say, like, we are ahead of the game now at Yahoo, and I'm pretty proud to be a part of that team now. But it's also happened. We did start at zero, a couple of years ago, and it's taken a long time for us to get to where we consider now the promised land. Products that we consider like a definition of promised land is Tumblr, right? Like, or Yahoo Mail, things where people use it all the time, and I'll go into that a little bit in a little while as well. But again, like, what you typically see for any company or product is that they launch, they get some press, PR, hype, maybe they get a little bit of hype, and it shoots up, everyone's excited, they think they're on the top of the world. But like literally 2 weeks later, or maybe even a couple days later, everything falls flat. And a lot of people make mistakes right off of the wearing off of novelty. They think that since it wasn't an overnight success, they should stop working on it. So what I tell anybody who's working in the space is that you have to go through the trough of sorrow. It's gonna happen no matter what. You'll never have an overnight success, and no company has ever gone through an overnight success. All the things that you read in the press about, like, this company got like millions of users overnight. Sure, that night, but they might have been working on it for 2 years, or they might have been working on it 16 months before they even got to that point. And that's really important. And if you think about it from a life perspective, when I met my wife, it was super exciting. It was all this launch and the hype. It was like the most exciting times of my life. Then it sort of wore off after I got married. I was like, it's kind of boring. And then you have to work at it, right? Like, you just have to keep working at this relationship, and either it fails, and you have the crash of ineptitude, which I think happened at some point, and I'm sure my wife wasn't happy during that time frame. But then I think we're now towards the promised land. We have a kid now. He's pretty cool. He kicked his teacher last night. But if you think about it, like, if you think about anything that you do, you always have this tendency to go to these shiny new objects. And what I would always advise, no matter what you're working on, is to take a step back and say, am I quitting too early? And again, these are a lot of discussions that a lot of companies have, because they say, we got data. There is the lean startup approach, which is not any different from this, but the goal there is about how do you fail fast and like learn from it, but not like stop working on like what your true north is or whatever your company ideas are. And in my opinion, there's never a dumb idea. typically the dumb ideas end up being some of the best ideas because of the way in which the consumer was approached and the customer value proposition. Any questions, by the way? Because I know I'm going through these, and feel free at any given time. We'll have, okay, go ahead. Oh. My life sorrow is still there. So it really depends on each company, right? Like again, my job at our company is to make this delta as small as possible. But I think startup companies probably have a longer sorrow period because they don't have like the marketing behind it. They're trying different methodologies. Some would argue that the trough of sorrow for startups are actually shorter because they don't have all that stuff. So they use all kinds of channels to figure out how to take guerrilla tactics. So I think it depends on each company. For example, I mean, most people don't know this, but like Snapchat actually had it for 16 months before they even hit, product market fit. They were failing, but they just kept going because they knew that there was something behind a certain aspect of what they were doing. Tumblr is probably a great example for Yahoo. That again, I'm in growth mode with them right now, and our goal is to grow that product. And we consider them in the promised land, and they've been growing at a tremendous rate in the last year. But before they were acquired, like they were working on this problem and making sure that people understood what like a Tumblr was at the end of the day and the concept behind it. And they were around for 7 years, and so that takes a long time, and there's a lot of work behind it before before you see overnight successes. Any other questions? I saw someone like barely raise their hand, and then they got scared when she asked it. I knew it, right behind her. It basically means like you probably had some Hail Mary product feature, and you're just like, this is going to save our product, and this is going to make everything just so amazing. And typically companies focus on very transactional style stuff. So what it basically means is that like we tried it, we put it out there, and everyone hated it, and then just the product crashed. And then that's when you basically say like, I hate my life, I give up, or we're going to try again. And sometimes when they try again, you can go back and getting the base that you had, or sometimes like you call it quits at that time for a certain product that you have. Any other questions? Clicker. I've been investing and advising companies, fortunately and unfortunately for them, depending on if they like me or not, for I guess roughly 10 years since I started. And the goal here was to be able to learn. So the goal of me investing with some of my colleagues and I was to figure out what the ecosystem looked like. What if I was a product myself, what are the types of things that I can learn from these investments, and how can I apply them back to whatever I'm doing? So if I think about it myself as a product, what are my weaknesses? What are some of the strengths that I want to focus on? What can I learn from some of these companies? Some of these companies have failed. Some of these companies have succeeded a little bit, and some of these companies have like taken off. And I mean, you'll see some of them obviously that are up here that like you recognize. Some of them you might recognize in 4 to 5 years that they are successful, and some companies you'll never hear of ever again. But that's fine. These are unsuccessful attempts. Doesn't mean they won't be successful long term. And a lot of these guys are repeat entrepreneurs. They just keep trying and trying again. And some of these guys are from UMD here in Maryland as well. So 2 guys, and like later on I can tell you who they are and if you want to get in contact with them. But they come from everywhere. Like startup companies don't just happen in the Valley. And in fact, a lot of these portfolios here are based in Sweden, UK, Canada, Southern California, and here in New York and in Silicon Valley. It doesn't matter where they are. It's mostly like where is a certain type of, I want to say people, whatever their approach is, it's usually empathetic towards what that cause is. And they end up doing a better job than anyone else can. Doesn't matter where they're located. So I know you guys hear a lot of buzz about like the Valley and everything's happening there, but that's not always typically the case. Sure, you do see a lot of these companies end up scaling in the Valley as well because it's easier to find specific types of talent. But that doesn't mean you cannot do a lot of these things here. And if I knew what I knew today, and of course that's like easy to say 2020, then I probably wouldn't have moved, right? I probably would have tried to figure out a way in which I can find a lot of those same expertises even here if I needed to. Questions around that? I'm sorry? The fade? Oh, failed. Sure. So there's a Adelio, crowd mob. I think Storehouse will fail. Vetable is doing relatively okay. Heydays failed. Wantful went out of business, so they just failed. Yard sale failed. You see this recurring theme of I just have all these failures in my life. Front back failed, but front is okay. Kickstand failed. Actually, that founder now works with us at Yahoo, and the rest are still around, still working. And Rubicon went public. Everyone knows what Facebook is. Other inbox sold to Return Path, but yeah, those were the failures. More questions all of a sudden. Yeah. When you say limited releases, you mean a limited release approach, like towards marketing of the product, or it's only available in that region? That I think it depends on what your product is. So, for instance, Postmates, right? Like they have to scale over time, and they can only have a certain amount of. Since they're a marketplace economy, they have a certain amount of supply and demand in certain areas, and they have to sort of gear up for that. And Postmates start in one city or another. That's fine. That's normal. Again, I think it just depends on the context of what the product is, what your core value proposition is, and then what's the customer narrative and customer story, and can you scale in that area? So I don't think it hurts you unless your communications product, like live text, is what we launched 10 weeks ago. And that's purely based on for you being able to communicate. So if I had somebody in New York not being able to communicate with someone in LA or even like outside the country, clearly there'd be a breakage point because of the value proposition is to communicate, not to sort of like separate that. So we actually did have a school-by-school approach. We're still in a school-by-school approach, which is that we focus on the way what we've learned in life tech so far is that like in your formative years of your life, so college and high school, is when you're building your friendships, and you tend to have like a close amount of 6 to 7 friends. And if you can connect with those 6 and 7 friends in our product, then we tend to see them stay in our product for a very, very long time, and they stay engaged and connected. And so as a company and as a product, as we're going through our slide that you saw with the Trapasaro, is that like, again, part of the goal is to get a lot of this data as much as possible, learn from it, iterate, and then find the unique ways in which we can get the product to grow. And so colleges have been like a fair amount part of that strategy. So the early companies, so it's hard to invest in good companies in general, because what happens is that you only see a certain amount of deal flow or companies in the beginning, and you want to sort of just increase your network. Again, my goal was to learn, so I didn't really care if I was part of the hottest deal or not. It was more like, do I like the team? Can I learn from them? And can I take those learnings and apply them to whatever I'm doing? So if I just fell in love with something, I just like the idea generally. There are a bunch of companies that are not up here. I think she found that I invested in around 50 or something like that, and I didn't know that, and I got scared. I was like, oh my god, that's a lot of money. My wife is totally going to divorce me. But what's interesting about like the whole space is that like you just have no idea what's going to work and what's not going to work, and then you just have a tendency to just try to take the learnings and then and invest in what you think is just like a good idea and a good team, no matter what they're doing and who they are. And so a lot of the ideas have not been the greatest sometimes, but you just get excited about the people and their passion behind it. And so I invested in a company called Push for Pizza. Have you guys heard of that at all? Yeah, I love the guys. I think they already know this. I say that all the time. I think their company is going to totally fail. Because of the way in which they're doing this, supply and demand, and what they're running into. But they had a college approach that we learned that was just very, very good, and then we learned from that. And I've applied that for what I'm doing, but I've also had them sort of advise and work with companies that are a part of my portfolio and other portfolio companies, because they had a specific way in which they approached the topic of distributing in schools that worked really well. Now their product churn, that's a different issue, but their top of the funnel in terms of acquiring users worked out really well. So when you find these aspects of what I'd call like genius in certain areas, and you want to be able to try to apply that and bring it back to the ecosystem and see where else it can be applied to, because these things cycle, they come back every once in a while, sometimes they don't, and it's just always fun learning it, because as I'm getting older, I feel like I'm losing all my skills to understand that market. Any other questions? Shall move on. This is probably like the hardest thing to do. The growth team is separated, and I'll get into this in a little bit, is essentially about making big bets and not being conservative. And so typically startup companies, companies that are in its growth stage, or they have accumulated a certain amount of user base, they get scared to move on. And what that basically means is that they're basically saying, if I do anything with the customer base that I have or the product and services that I have, I might end up losing all of that. And I think a good example or a good company, if you think about that, they're always willing to cannibalize their own products is Apple. Like Apple has always been saying, like, I don't really care if it cannibalizes my pre-existing products, as long as my new products are going to trump everything else that I do. And so it's part of their inherent culture. And a lot of the digital companies today, I can't believe I used the word digital, but a lot of the consumer companies in the Valley are thinking this direction as well. And that's a lot of what we think about at Yahoo, as well as that, like, it's okay if we cannibalize a certain amount of our base, as long as the long-term goal of the company and the products and services that we build are going to just make our ecosystem larger, our customer experiences better for like the overall ecosystem of what we own. And so part of our team and our mandate is, like when I said we're the growth team and we have to grow, could mean new products, cannibalizing products of the old products, or it means you have your existing products grow. So there's plenty of examples, and if you guys understand that concept or not. Is that like that complicated, high level? Make sense? That guy's confused. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Totally. Yep. And this is where data comes in, and I'll get into that a little bit later as well. Is that like in the past that was always a concern because you didn't have the data to sort of support your thesis, and you weren't able to test quickly. And so what that ends up meaning was that like you just made a gut decision. You don't know what's going to happen. And so part of making larger bets also is just being data informed around like what your customer base looks like, and are you going to go after that same segment, are you going to cannibalize that segment, or let's go after a new segment. So it's just about thinking about your overall customer base, and are there pockets that are interesting, and can you grow off of that offshoot. So an example of that would be, let's just say you have 100 million users, and 20% of that is 13 to 18, and they use the product in a very specific way. Would you continue to have them use that in a specific way, or the way in which they use it in a specific way becomes its own product line, or it becomes a new product completely, or a new network? And these are the types of things that we debate. Not saying it works every time, but you have to, as companies, as we evolve, we take a lot of those bets to see, like, could something happen here? Could we make the overall product and the ecosystem larger? So yeah, it depends on that curve, right? If you're in the promised land, you're going to have a tendency to want to probably not take as many bets because it's starting to work, and you want to grow and augment it. And so yes, you're right. There are points at which you don't want to make those bets because you've already made that bet to get to that spot. Or you're already at the top of the mountain, and you have like you're at the peak, right? You're like, I did it, which hopefully you don't fall down the mountain right after that. But some companies do as well. So I won't say the names of those companies. I'm trying to be as polite as possible because I got some feedback that I was way too sarcastic. So like, case in point, Groupon or something like that. But I mean, what's important there is, like, on that curve is, as I mentioned, the trough of sorrow. That's where you are taking more of the bets because you don't really have a customer base to really grow off of. You're still trying to figure out what your product market fit is. Sorry, was there any more questions to that? I've written about this before, I mean, I've tried to crystallize it. I don't think there's like a pure science to it. Of course, a lot of this is art, but it's about like defining where product categories are. So the example of my history. So I had a company called Lolapps. We had about 100 million monthly active uniques. We did really well. We started on the Facebook platform, and then we went to mobile. We did Facebook games, and then we did mobile games, and it was a great outcome. Very happy with it. But the things that we learned from that was that at Lolapps, regardless of like the short-term success that we had, we never got to a utility phase. And like my goal and our goal at the teams that we work at, we're trying to get to a utility phase, because like it literally means that, right? Once you hit a utility phase with any product or service, like it's very, very hard to unseat it. Examples of utility are like Gmail, Yahoo Mail, Facebook, for instance, etc. Like these are basically like products now where they've like exceeded people's expectations, but now they've become your expectation in life on a daily basis, and people are innovating off of that prospect or that thesis. Lolapps, we never got past the one. Like we never hit number 2 and 3, no matter how much money we made. In terms of revenue for that company, we made about 100 million revenue per year, and we eventually got to 250. But we were in the life cycle of games, and then games in the category itself, like you never get out of like the want phase. And so a lot of the companies, what you end up seeing happening is they usually fail between the want and the need, the utility. I've felt all of these pains because there are some failures that I'm not writing in here, but for me personally and my co-founders and our team, we felt very good about Lolapps in terms of like a monetary perspective, and that we hit a certain threshold around how we think about product development. But for us, MessageMe, we didn't. And so the lesson learned for us with MessageMe and why we got to try again in terms of how we think about product development at Yahoo was that at MessageMe, we went from web to mobile. And now it's 20/20 hindsight today. Once I say this story, you guys are going to respond with like, well, duh, that's easy. But web had this linear growth curve for a very long time. They didn't really have exponential growth curve. Of course, products that were building on top of the web platform did have exponential growth curves because you had a certain base that you were attracting off of. Now with mobile, we just assumed that because like even though like lots of mobile phones were being sold and a lot of people were adopting it into their daily lives, a lot of people and a lot of companies got blindsided by this. Was that they didn't think the adoption rate for mobile for products and services would be so quick. And so when we saw our other competitors in the messaging space, messaging was very similar to the messaging apps that you guys might use, WhatsApp. It's case in point, or Kik, or even Facebook Messenger, etc., is that they had hit maybe like 15, 20, 35, 40 million users. But what ended up happening was that we said, okay, well, they're at that phase, and since in our past with Lolapps, we were able to scale to 100 million users very quickly and compete with our competitors. You guys know who Zynga is. Like we were first and second. We competed with them many, many times. So we thought we could use that same type of thought process and competition and growing our products, just the way in which we thought about product development in the mobile space. That did not work. We totally failed in terms of how we think about it from a competition perspective. We did hit 12 million users. We did hit it like fastest out of a lot of the other companies, and that's what we were known for. But by the time we hit 12 million users, a lot of our competitors were hitting 80, 100, 200, 300. And so we're totally far off from that. So we holistically sat back. This is when we were in our trough of sorrow, even though we were growing. But like, again, it just depends on the context of where you are with the rest of your market. Was that like we weren't going to be number 1, we weren't even going to be number 2. So we just put a stop. We just put a stop to what we were working on. I think we were roughly acquiring customers that are like around 150 to 180,000 people per day coming into our product. And a lot of people thought we were crazy when we said we're going to stop focusing on MessageMe, we're going to start something new. And so then we had a couple of ideas what we were going to think about working on, and Yahoo gave us the opportunity around some of our new ideas initiatives. But at the same time, they came and said, hey, you know how to think about product, you know how to think about growth, your team has done this before. Can you guys help us think through Yahoo's new transformational age and what we're thinking in the future? Can't say a lot of stuff we're working on, but like our team's name is called Growth and Emerging Products. That's exactly what the team's name is exactly what we do on a daily basis, and that's what we think about. Questions around that? Okay. I know this drawing is goofy, but every person that comes into our team, we show this to them, we draw out this diagram, and we say, this is how our team is structured. We have existing products team members, we have new product team members, and then we have the data and infrastructure team. And when we got to Yahoo, Yahoo has a lot of old tech. They've also been the pioneers of creating new tech. But where they were behind for us, coming from social gaming and fast, rapid iteration and just like measuring things on a daily basis, like daily cycles, daily releases, we had to build a data and infrastructure pipeline from the ground up. The data infrastructure pipeline is public, so it's not like I'm not saying anything secretive. We use Redshift. We basically took all the data from Yahoo and we just copied it over so we can do ad hoc queries and analysis. And what's really important for that is that we want to be able to see what people are doing in the app. We want to track their events. And we want to be able to make data-informed decisions about features that we might want to build in the future. And so have you guys heard like the data-driven approach towards product development? Okay, so we actually don't believe in that. We believe in like the data-informed approach. And there's a big difference between that. Like, when you have a data-driven approach, what you tend to do is you basically, there's like a very good phrase that if you took a data-driven approach, you would have had faster horses in New York City, right? Because the problem was that you just needed to like get from A to B rather than innovate and build cars. And so we think about that in the same way, which is like, how do we decipher between data that we're really going to act upon and build on top of, new products and experiences that like cater towards the customer, rather than like, because your data can say like, I don't have that many impressions on this page, and you can do a lot of things to boost up the impressions and get more customers into it. But that might come at the cost of what the long-term customer experience of the product is. And so as a team, our goal is to be able to provide these insights, this data as quickly as possible to every product team at Yahoo. We specifically work on mobile, and so that's what our team is known for, and that's what we focus on. And then that helps us inform our existing products growth and what we learn from there. But even more so, when we're thinking about new products, anything we do from M&A to building stuff from scratch, we have this history and context around how people use these products, segmentation, et cetera. And then it helps us to build these products. So LiveText comes out of that as well, because we had an existing pipeline of information, and it gave us better ways in which to think about our product development process. Questions around that? It's a very shy group. This is probably the first time I've seen the shy group. You guys are students. You're supposed to just like ask any question possible. Yeah, you've used it, but we don't communicate, so that's okay. Next slide. I will on the next slide. So these are the products that we work on at Yahoo. I will not tell you which ones do not fit product market fit. But what I will tell you, actually I won't tell you anything now. But our goal is essentially to grow these existing products, and our mandate as a team is to grow mobile DAU. So mobile being the future, where we think everyone is obviously the bet of where everyone's going to use our products and services. Not to say web isn't growing, because it is, but it's not growing at the same exponential rate. And so a lot of what we cater towards is being able to inform these teams so that they can do a better job. A lot of what we're doing is applied to startup companies as well. So some of the stuff we're doing is being open sourced. We want the whole overall ecosystem to perform and get better. So if you are interested in some of that stuff, feel free to talk to me. I'm happy to send you out in those directions so you can understand it. Again, what this helps us do, as I mentioned before on the data and infrastructure side, it lets us work on super secret projects. I think one of the main reasons that have attracted a lot of entrepreneurs to Yahoo specifically, and why I'm there as well, is that we get to work on the most innovative side at Yahoo rather than think about how to market legacy products. Not to say that legacy products are not fun, but it's just a lot more fun to tinker and start stuff from scratch. So the same way in which you guys are out here like working your butts off on a daily basis, our offices don't look any different. Like, you have people sleeping on the floor, you have food that you step on by accident, which like really frustrates me because like people aren't clean. And I saw you guys like vacuuming here, so maybe that was the same case. But it's something that's like very dear to our hearts from like a culture perspective, and it's how we attract talent at the same time, which is to say like we are a community of people. My team's size is above 50. I can't give you the exact number, but this is exactly what we do when we split up and think about our products. I'll talk about LiveText really quickly. So LiveText was born out of a super secret project. After we got acquired, we pitched the idea the same way in which you think about when you guys are thinking about starting companies or through the accelerator program. We pitched. Our investors are essentially my boss and Marissa, who's at the top, and we had to basically say, like, here's our idea, here's how we think about it, here's the data to support what we're doing, here's the overall story, here's where we are in 6 months, here's where we were 6 months ago, and here's where we are today as a company and a product team, and this is what we want to do. And so LiveText was born out of the idea that through the silent video generation is that you have your phone on a daily basis. You're going in and out of different circumstances throughout your life. And that might not necessarily lend itself to be able to use video calling services. Because video calling services, naturally, it's like a calling metaphor, and you're calling someone. And that essentially means it feels more formal. And so what we wanted to do is bring the silent part. We are early, but a lot of the stats are pretty exciting. So if you guys have questions around that, I'm happy to inform that. We have other projects as well. Maybe one day you guys will see some of that stuff. Questions, criticisms, ideas are totally fine with us. If you guys, one of the main things, when I got invited here, I got excited about is that I know you guys are working on a lot of stuff. So I personally like to see these things. I'm happy to give advice. I'm not very smart. So a lot of the advice I'm going to give, you're going to be like, oh, that old guy doesn't know anything he's talking about. Like Bill here doesn't know what he's talking about either. We're the same. But the way that I would think about it is that you guys have a better instinct around product development, in my opinion, than a lot of us that are out there. You guys are living it at your age. A lot of the consumers and customers that we go after, you guys are there, right? You guys see it on a daily basis. You're empathetic towards your own customer base, which is basically your colleagues, your friends, and your loved ones. You guys are seeing it on a daily basis. And so your guys' instincts, the ideas that you guys have, I know you showed me an idea earlier today, they're good. And so I would just not let anyone tell you that they're bad ideas. They could be bad, but you'll learn really quickly that you might need to iterate on top of it. You might need to pivot a little bit and figure out what it is that you like to do, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and just keep honing in on it. So a lot of the stuff that I've seen here are pretty awesome, and so I'd love to take a little bit more on that stuff. Any other questions? This is the end of my boring subject and topic. Go ahead.
So can you talk a little bit more about pivots? Certainly Slack and Twitter, all of it.
Have you guys heard of the pivot concept? You guys familiar with it? Nod your heads if you've heard of it. Okay, he said no. So, is that a no in the back? Okay. For us in the Valley, what pivot basically means is that you're literally pivoting towards a completely new direction, which is that the idea that you started with is it's not even close to that same vein in terms of what it could look like 6 months ago. You just basically stop everything, and as I mentioned before, everything starts at zero. You go back to zero. You scrap everything, your tech, whatever you wrote before, any of your product instincts you had, and you just start all over again. And so he was bringing in concepts around Twitter and Slack. Yes, those guys were complete pivots, but the way in which it happened, the story is always different, and sort of history kind of rewrites itself. But Slack was a gaming company first. I forgot the name of what that company was. And then essentially they found that while they were building, but it always comes from something that they've done and something that they're learning or a frustration that they've had. So they learned while they were building their gaming company that they had a lot of frustration of internal collaboration and being able to communicate. And the products and services that they were using, they just hated it. And so then they basically went on this 1 to 2 year binge of trying to figure out how to make that product the best way possible. Any of you guys familiar with IRC? Okay. Slack is kind of built based on that model of how people communicate on those open channels and open frequencies, whatever you want to call it. And have any of you guys actually use Slack? Yeah, so cool. Yeah, it's been adopted very quickly, and a lot of people like using it. But what's interesting is that there were a lot of products prior to Slack that were kind of trying to solve the same thing, but they took a different approach to it. And Slack basically took a very Dropbox model approach, which is I'm just going to get it to the end consumer first, and those guys can create their own groups and collaboration. And it doesn't have to be a company; it could be just a group of people. So even though I personally use Slack now for just like communicating with my friends around specific topics and subjects. Kind of nerdy, but I think it's better than the other products that are out there. And then Twitter, for example, if you guys have probably already heard the story, but like they started off trying to be like this broadcasting platform, and then they slowly moved into what Jack, and there's plenty of things you can watch on YouTube around how he thought about it. And a lot of his ideas came through taxi dispatching and the way in which people communicated through the radio. And then what would that look like on the internet? That's where they came up with the SMS, 140 characters, and through SMS as like a delivery mechanism. The pivots that I've gone through have only been at Lolapps. Like we didn't do a pivot at MessageMe, and pivots don't happen all the time. So contrary to popular belief, a lot of people say, you know, I pivoted and I figured it out. Again, I'd go back to the same thing. It starts at zero, you start all over again. A pivot basically means you've given up on whatever you're doing, and people like to use that word when something is successful. You never hear someone say like, I pivoted towards my failure. You always hear like, we pivoted and we were successful. And so like everyone kind of pivots, but it's just more around like what the focus is and how they get there. At Lolapps, our actually main pivot, if you want to call it, is that we were in the gifts and quizzes space on the Facebook platform. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are not familiar with what the Facebook platform was back in the day, 8 years ago. But they allowed us to do, like on the Facebook open platform, on the web platform, we called it the iframe internal platform. When you were logged into Facebook, we had a lot of gifts and quizzes. We had a ton of distribution, but we knew that over time was not going to sustain our company because it was fleeting. You know, users didn't stay in it for a long time. It didn't have a daily habit. And so we thought like the long-term goal and what we were also passionate about was gaming. So our major pivot as a company, which is why I talk about the want utility mode, is like how do you take bigger bets, was that we had to take a very big bet towards social and mobile gaming. And then the base that we had, there was only a very small percentage of it that would actually move to gaming versus our overall base. Because we knew that our overall base of 100 million, we wouldn't have it long term. And we had to basically start from scratch, build new products, and figure out a way to find an overlapping users and customers that we had in the gifts and quizzes and move them into gaming. And so that was our actual big pivot. It took us from start to finish to being, which is why we got acquired in the first place. We were acquired because we went into games and we built our data platform for games. We had predictive technology. But from start to getting our first successful game, it took us 2 years, even though we had a previous success of gifts and quizzes, which sustained our company. But that helped us sort of leapfrog into another area because that was essentially what we called our cash cow, and it allowed us to innovate towards what we were doing in the future. A lot of companies still do that today, which is they have their cash cow function, they have their overall growth, and what they try to do is take 2/3 of their overall workforce and try to move it towards new products and innovation and development, versus the third will be about growing the existing audience or products. I know that was a long answer to a short question. Anything else? Don't be shy. Yeah. Yeah. So you probably don't hear this much. I hated starting a company. I've never wanted to start a company. I never wanted to be a CEO of a company. Leading is a thankless job. And yeah, it's just stressful. It's just very, very stressful. And so the only reason I started companies with people that that I've worked with for, I want to say roughly like almost 9 years now, it was that I learned from them. I liked working with them, and I didn't feel like I was working a day in my life. And that was really important. And the types of ideas that we had and what we wanted to build couldn't be facilitated where I was working. So like the companies weren't going to allow me to be innovative or build new products, which is what I'm passionate about working on. And so, like I think it was around 2006, 2007, I went to go pitch my idea. I wonder if I should tell you the idea now. This is a terrible idea. But like, yeah, I was pitching for $25,000, and it took me like 6 months to raise $25,000. I had this like diagram. Like I watched all these like videos and other things people do, like what they did. I would read these blogs about like how this guy got his first like money. I was like, I could do that too. Like it should be easy. Like I don't need to be methodical about it. I just draw it on a napkin. It'll look cool. I went there, and like the investor like literally told me like, this is terrible. You need to get out of my face. And so that's what I think. Like you're gonna struggle through a lot of these things because you might not have some experience with it. But I don't think people should give up, which is if they're like really passionate about it. And I think if I didn't have like the support of family, friends, and like an overall ecosystem that had seen this before, I think I probably would have given up in general. Like I'm generally a very lazy person. I really don't. One, I don't like waking up early in the morning. I don't like going to any locations. I ran out of breath coming here. It takes forever from the center of DC. But like, you know, again, I think a support structure similar to what the support structure you guys have here is really important to be able to lean on people and figure out if this is actually what you want to do, and when, you know, will people come to your aid and be by your side as you're building and raising capital. Raising capital is like a totally different subject altogether. It's exciting and depressing at the same time. Other questions? I know it's Friday. I'm taking a lot of time out of your day. So the analytics tool that we use is Looker. So you can go to getlooker.com, I think is the name of the website. Looker, L-O-O-K-E-R. And then we use that on top of Amazon Redshift. Looker is just like a LookML query tool. It's not too dissimilar to Mixpanel. The difference is that like you have your own data store. Again, are most people here engineers, not engineers? Just trying to figure it out. Okay. The data store is like ours, and like we get to control our data. That's why we use that tool. But a tool like Mixpanel works really well for like starting a startup right from the beginning. It's pretty much the same stuff. How do you combat like multiple ideas, or? If somebody's done it, can we do it better? That's the question. This is a very hard one. So I've felt like the best companies that I've seen, or the best people, are coming from a fresh approach and have no fear. And no fear basically means just because someone else has done it doesn't mean that they can't do it. Now, that's not to say that like I'm going to go build search, I'm going to beat Google is like crazy, but you would be surprised the amount of people that pitch to me saying like, I'm going to go beat Google and I'm going to do it. And like sometimes I fall in love with them and I say, can I marry you? But like it's exciting, right? Like there are ideas that I don't think are crazy in any vein. And I think to a certain extent when the Google guys were pitching, they didn't feel any different. Because Yahoo was just so large at that given time, and I'm sure when like Jerry and David Filer, who are the founders of Yahoo, they've told the story to us many times, is that they felt the same way as well. Like they're saying like I'm going to have this directory of services, and like there were other companies that were like huge incumbents that were already thinking about this stuff. Like how are you going to beat those? And so I would never discourage anybody from saying like just because another company is doing it that you can't do it better. I think inherently. Startups always do stuff faster and better than larger companies. You forget that like you always hear the argument from an older generation of folks that like just this company is doing this, so like you can't compete. Generally, companies that are larger are slower. They have a larger momentum that they have to either go against or with, depending on what they're doing. Whereas like as you're a startup, you have the ability to be very, very agile and move very quickly towards the things that you know are working without having to have like an audience or lots of people making decisions around the table. And so part of the struggles of any company as it's scaling is that like you get into that mode and you over time it's just natural. You become slower and slower. So you hopefully the product that you're building with a large enough network effect, it's harder to unseat. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Has anyone used your stuff to try it out? Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's like not saying that me being busy is cool. It's cool. It's a product. Yeah, I don't know how to use it. Like if I was to use it, like I can't wait to watch TV shows. So I'm like a huge like TV show entertainment addict. I just like binge watch everything. And I love being alone. I hate going to the movie theater. And I hate having people bother me while I'm watching it. So like for me, VR is like awesome. And it's just like as a geek, I get to nerd out and put this on, and no one else can bother me. And it's just like undivided attention. So I think like there are probably going to be facets of that where it's going to be the undivided type applications that people are going to use, and maybe messaging gets into that. I have a hard time believing like by human nature you're going to want to like step into that and communicate in the ways in which we're used to. I think the way in which people will communicate, the same way in which people communicate through like World of Warcraft, some of the esports that are out there. I don't know if anybody plays games here or anything like that, but like how Second Life was in the past. I think those are going to be the types of functionalities that we'll see more in VR than anything else. And then again, like teaching tools and assistance and the way in which communication embeds itself as like a feature, but not like a primary core. I could be wrong. I'm wrong like 90% of the time anyways, but like that's how I feel like we as consumers would use those types of products. But they inform me every day on new ways in which people are using those products. So I'm generally fascinated to see what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So this is why we look at data very carefully, and why we have data inform a lot of our decisions. Anna at some point can probably tell you how she feels about press, because like she deals with all of that stuff, and she's an expert in that field. But like from a product perspective, I think the more you believe in the hype, I think the worse you become from a product perspective, because you are listening to like positive reinforcement. Even if your product is bad, you're not looking at the data, and vice versa. If you listen to negative critics about like your product sucks or whatever, and if you're not looking at the data correctly, that can also help inform you towards not being able to look at the whole holistic picture. So I actually almost never ever let, just not to say that once or twice I haven't looked at it, depending on what the context was, but I almost never, and our team almost never gets influenced by the press or marketing materials that are talking about our products, if it's positive or negative. Now, of course, those help you feel your momentum to continue to work because it's like a good morale booster, but you generally don't let the negative stuff affect your product development cycle, because ideally you have the data to back up what you're doing and the decisions that you're making. Yeah, so, okay, so she's shaking her head because she knows exactly what I was going to ask. If I could say it, I cannot. But I can talk about my past company, Lolapps, and MessageMe. So one thing that was interesting, MessageMe, we grew really quickly in the UK, and there's two reasons for that. We got to the top of the charts. We were there for almost like 6 weeks total, just straight. Everyone using it on a daily basis, and UK till the day we shut the service down was actually our #1 country that was using it on a daily basis. But there were two reasons for it. One was there were a bunch of popular comedians that started using UK in certain sites, and it just popped all of a sudden. People really liked it, and they basically just went out. So that's like my definition of like an influencer rather than like a critic. Right? It's not their job to spread the word about like is the product good or not, and they basically like loved the product because it reminded them of the old BBM PIN code, and that PIN code just was like very nostalgic for them because BBM was massive in the UK, and it was, I think like UK was the last country to hold out in terms of being able to adopt the iPhone and the Android phone and ecosystem. They just kept using it, and so they were the last step. So like we had a PIN-based system in MessageMe, and we grew very quickly because people just recognized it. The younger generation also recognized it, and they felt very nostalgic towards it, and they just loved it. But that happened because like these comedians would talk about like, oh man, like, you know, BBM is back. but it's called MessageMe. It's like the new thing. This is probably the funny story. There was like this famous taxi cab app, not taxi cab app, but like this radio app that was very popular in Turkey, and then from Turkey, a lot of the like the migrant movement of like taxi cab riders were coming into the UK as well. And there was this one famous guy who would just talk about politics through his app. He just moved over to our app and used the audio feature of like send and receive, since we were one of the first ones to do it. And he just moved everyone to the channel. He created a group, and he had like I think 10,000 people in a group. He always like took our servers down. But like for us, we considered him an influencer because he brought people into our app and used the product on a daily basis. Your question is, you're a one-man person. You're a Renaissance man. Is that it? You can take $1,000 out of your bank account and spend it on advertising and get as many users as possible into your app. No, I'm just joking. I think there are. I think there are. Is that me? How rude! So rude. I think that's a hard thing to tell because it just depends on what you're building and what you're trying to do. And you know, like I said, like we're focused on some school stuff, and so schools make sense. We're going after that community of dense populated networks and try to get people to communicate. Facebook applied the same thing. Well, actually, when I came here to Maryland through the orientation process, like they forced us to get a Facebook account. They're like, you have to get a Facebook account because if you're not, like, you're not relevant. And I was like, just doing it as fast as possible, and then like stalk all the hot chicks that like went to school here. But like it was great. And then so if you think about every channel and every product that's out there, they do it in different ways. You know, Tinder went to colleges and universities. And I'm talking about consumer products, but even like the food company, Postmates, etc. They actually went after startup companies because there was a community of people that needed to eat, and a lot of the companies in the valley, including Yahoo, like, you know, we provide free lunches, and so that's great, right? But so Postmates basically said, well, what if we could provide you cooler free lunches from what people, and so they would work with companies, and that was their like groundswell movement. Every company does it in a specific way. It just depends on what's your vertical, who's your customer, what's that narrative, and what type of marketing do you think is going to work. And I think my favorite is marketing on the ground type stuff to see what the feedback is immediately, and if there's word of mouth behind it. I'm always an advocate of trying to spend as less money as possible, trying to get the customers in there. And if your product is really good, it has its own sort of factor of growth. Even if you're getting like 3 people per day, it's like a starting point. Okay. No more questions. Someone's trying to call me too, and hopefully it's not my wife. She's like, was it? She's mad. Last question. Cool. Yeah. Yep. Phone number. Sure. So you should actually be able to sign up for a live text account with your phone number and not a Yahoo account. If you encountered it, shoot it over to me. I get really angry at our support staff, but you shouldn't have gotten that. However, if you've had a Yahoo account that you have, like in the past, like do you do any sports or fantasy leagues? I got you. Only if you've verified a phone number in the past, we sort of recognize and say, like, would you like to use your old Yahoo account? You can still say no and say, I just want to use my phone number. You just have to choose that option. Sorry about that. There are free stuff, Yahoo swag in the back that Anna brought for you. I brought it as well, physically. But again, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to come up to me. But like, thanks for having me, and I appreciate it.